In February of 1959, in the frozen wilderness of the Ural Mountains, 9 experienced hikers vanished into the snow. What happened to them over the following days has never been fully explained. To this day, their deaths remain one of the most debated mysteries of the 20th century. This is the story of the Dyatlov Pass incident. It began, as many tragedies do, with ordinary ambition. In late January 1959, a group of 10 university students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute set out on a skiing expedition through the northern Urals. Their goal was to reach Gorau Torkin, a mountain whose name, in the language of the local Mansi people, is said to mean "don't go there." The trip was rated as a Category 3 hike, the most difficult classification in the Soviet grading system, and completing it would earn the group an official certification in mountaineering. The expedition was led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student known for his careful planning and technical skill. He was joined by 8 companions: Zinaida Kolmogorova, Ludmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolevatov, Rustam Slobodin, Yuri Doroshenko, Yuri Krivonischenko, Nikolai Thibault Brignoles, and Semyon Zolotaryov, an older ex-soldier who had joined the group somewhat unexpectedly. A 10th member, Yuri Yudin, turned back early in the journey due to illness, a decision that would save his life and leave him to carry the weight of the tragedy for decades afterward. The group set off by train, then truck, then on foot, skiing in a terrain that grew more remote and more hostile with every mile. Temperatures dropped well below freezing. Wind cut across the open slopes. Diaries and photographs recovered later show a group in good spirits, singing, joking, documenting their progress with the quiet pride of young people testing themselves against the wilderness. On the 1st of February, the hikers began their ascent toward Kholit Syakhl, a mountain whose Mansi name translates roughly to Dead Mountain. It was here on the slope of that mountain that they made camp for the night, pitching their tent directly on the open snowfield rather than descending into the shelter of the treeline below. It was a decision that has puzzled investigators for over 60 years. Experienced hikers, and Dyatlov was nothing if not experienced, do not usually choose exposed terrain over the safety of the forest unless something makes the alternative seem necessary, or unless they simply run out of daylight and options. That was the last time any of them were seen alive. When the group failed to send the expected telegram confirming their return, family members grew anxious. By the 20th of February, a search party had been organized, made up of fellow students, volunteers, and eventually the military and police. What they found, over the course of the following weeks, would become the foundation of a mystery that has never been fully laid to rest. The tent was discovered first, half buried on the slope of Kholit Syakhl. It was still standing, still staked into the snow, but it had been cut open from the inside. The hikers' boots, coats, and supplies remained inside, undisturbed, as though they had been abandoned in a hurry by people with no time to dress for the cold. Footprints, some in socks, some barefoot, led away from the tent toward the treeline more than a kilometer away, down a slope in conditions that would have been brutally, dangerously cold. The first 2 bodies were found beneath a large cedar tree at the forest's edge. Broken branches on the tree suggested someone had climbed it, perhaps to look back toward the tent, or perhaps to escape something on the ground. Nearby, the remains of a small fire showed that at least some of the group had tried, briefly, to survive the night. 3 more bodies were found scattered between the cedar and the tent, seemingly in the act of trying to return to camp. It would take almost 2 more months to find the final 4. Their bodies lay buried under several meters of snow in a ravine deeper in the forest, discovered only when the spring thaw began to expose the terrain. And it was here that the case shifted from tragedy into enigma. Unlike the first 5, these 4 hikers bore severe physical trauma. Nikolai Thibault Brignoles had a fatal skull fracture. Ludmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov both had fractured ribs consistent with the kind of blunt force associated with a car crash, yet without any external bruising or broken skin to explain it. Dubinina's tongue, eyes, and portions of her facial tissue were missing, injuries initially attributed to decomposition and animal activity, though this explanation has never fully satisfied everyone who has studied the case. The official Soviet investigation, conducted quickly and under significant political pressure, closed the case within months. Its conclusion was vague to the point of unhelpfulness. The hikers had died as the result of a compelling natural force. No further explanation was offered. The files were sealed, and for decades, they remained largely inaccessible to the public. In the absence of a satisfying official answer, theories multiplied. Some pointed to an avalanche, though the slope's angle and the position of the tent made a classic avalanche unlikely, and no clear avalanche debris was found at the time. Others suggested a slab avalanche, a more localized and sudden collapse of snow, a theory that gained renewed scientific support in recent years through modeling conducted by researchers who argued it could explain both the group's flight from the tent and some of the physical injuries. Still, other theories reached further. Some believed the group had encountered a secret Soviet weapons test, pointing to reports of low-level radiation found on some of the clothing, though officials later attributed this to the thoriated equipment some of the hikers carried for their studies. Others suggested an encounter with the indigenous Mansi people, a theory investigators pursued and ultimately dismissed for lack of evidence of any struggle or conflict. And some have proposed more extreme explanations entirely, from infrasound-induced panic to encounters with the unexplained, though none of these carry verified scientific support. What is agreed upon by nearly every serious investigation since is this: 9 capable, experienced people cut their way out of their own tent in the middle of a sub-zero night and ran, some without shoes, some without coats, down a mountainside and into a forest, and did not stop until the cold or the terrain or something else killed them. Whatever drove them from that tent, it frightened them enough to choose the freezing dark over whatever they believed was happening inside. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened an investigation into the case, ultimately affirming the avalanche theory as the most probable explanation. Many researchers, including some of the scientists behind the newer avalanche modeling, consider this the most evidence-based conclusion available. But for many others, including relatives of the victims, the explanation still fails to account for every detail. The missing tissue, the peculiar injuries, the choices made in those final, desperate hours. The pass where they died now bears their leader's name. Dyatlov Pass, a quiet, windswept place in the Ural Mountains, a monument standing where 9 young people once pitched a tent and never came home. More than 60 years later, their story endures, not because every question has been answered, but because so many of them have not. If you enjoyed this documentary and want more true mysteries from history, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and let us know in the comments.